many of you work for companies where once a contract is signed, it is filed away and probably never consulted again until you're ready to re-up and renegotiate that contract after it's run? Show of hands. How many of you do that? Fair number of hands I'm seeing in the audience. Well, Gordon and Serion have a solution for that, and also have, I think, a lesson for companies that are trying to manage a large corpus of data that they don't currently take advantage of. So Gordon, let me begin by asking you some questions about your use of AI, because you're not new to AI, are you?
We are not.
You guys have been using AI for almost 10 years, right?
Yeah, so the Sirion is a 10-year-old company. We started off, and if you think about contracts, the important part about contracts is extracting the metadata, the clauses, the obligations, service levels, rate cards, et cetera, out of that contract so that you can then understand your performance against that contract. So from the inception of the company back in 2014, we were using NLP, which I heard earlier, OCR, to extract data out of contracts. When, around the 2017 timeframe, when machine learning came out, we started using transformer models, and we've built over 600 transformer models that have a high level of precision of extracting data out of contracts. And then in the last couple of years, we've started using generative AI technology to expand our use of AI.
And it's that generative AI that we want to talk about today. And it's sort of, you've created a couple of different features out of it. One of them involves redlining. And you were explaining to me earlier where the term redlining a contract actually comes from. What's the history of that?
Yeah, so obviously redlining, and if you guys just remember your grade school teachers marking up your papers, it's not dissimilar from that. But when we were using paper contracts, you would send it over to your legal teams, and they would literally take a red pen and mark through the contract and make sure that they, recognize the risk in the contract, any types of terms and conditions, or anything that was out of skew from your standard corporate positions. So redlining in the context of a contract lifecycle management system today is really not much different other than it's digital. So typically we do it in Microsoft Word because that tends to be the tool for lawyers and legal teams. And we have a process that we automate that where you can either use your paper and send it out to your counterparty, or you can take the counterparty's paper, which we call third-party paper, and mark it up inside of our solution and do that redlining process back and forth until you come to terms with your agreements and conditions that you want to sign off on, and then go to signature and then execute the contract.
And you're looking obviously to make those contracts less risky for my company, but it's not just based on your own assessment of risk, right? It's also based on my particular company's assessment of what is a risky clause in that contract.
Yeah, so with the advent of generative AI, we're able to create what we call playbooks, and playbooks basically state your preferred positions across the contract. It could be a piece of metadata. It might be a clause that needs to be included within your contract. There's certain conditions around obligations that you want to make sure you adhere to. So that playbook defines what your preferred positions are. We then use LLMs, in this case Llama, to fine-tune and actually create active prompts to go in and assess that contract and be able to redline it for you and do issue detection.
And you're able not just to look at it on a clause basis, which is to say a paragraph of a contract, but also down to the word level, right? You can change a word here or there to make a difference.
Yeah, that's right. So the playbook is very specific. So some vendors in this space do it at a metadata level. So they look at, for example, terms, payment terms. It might be 45 days versus 60 days. They go in and just extract that out and substitute it. Some vendors are using shell outs to ChatGPT and just replacing full clauses. Our playbook allows you to go at a granular level and actually look at the various issues within a specific clause, not at a clause level, but at a paragraph level, but at a sentence level, and sometimes even a word level. So think about something as small as the word not. It's a very three-letter word, but it could really change the context of a clause and the terms that are specified in that clause.
And then the other feature, which is in a sense really the breakthrough feature of this product, is this notion that you can search either a particular contract or a company's entire corpus of contracts.
That's correct.
and do so with natural language. So I don't need to be trained as a lawyer to actually query the database and get something of value out of it. Tell me about how that works.
Yeah, so we've, with the advent of using Watson for this, we're actually using conversational bots. You can ingest a contract and actually probe that contract using not just filters like you do with typical search where it's word search. You can actually go out and probe the contract and understand, what is the contract implying? Is there risk associated with this contract? And ask it, conversational type questions. That's at the contract level. You can also take your entire corpus of documents. So I will tell you, IBM has 500,000 contracts that they've ingested into the Serion platform. Any user with the right permissions can go in and actually probe and understand across all of those contracts, various types of information. So for example, if you wanted to, search for which contracts are expiring in the next 90 days or which contracts have a termination for convenience, and then drill down into those contracts and actually make them actionable and see those insights very quickly. The traditional way was, the line of business would have to either reach out to legal and try to get that information from them, which could take days or weeks, or they just got surprised. There's a contract that expired, we didn't know it was expiring, so all of a sudden we're all scrambling to try to get a renewal in place for one of our key customers. So it really does put the power of your contracts and your book of business at the line of business and allows them to actually go out and search and get the information they need to be effective.
So in a sense, it's almost as if you can use contracts to manage your business, as opposed to simply having to put up with the fact that you've got to reduce everything to a contract these days. They can actually become something that is almost a productivity tool for people at the line of business level who never have spent a day at law school.
100%.
All right. So what's the ROI here when we talk about both for the legal department and using the redlining system and also for the larger business? Give us a sense of sort of what the numbers are showing.
Yeah, so, the obvious one is just efficiency, right? So being able to take those redlining turns, it's been said that it takes about 13 minutes per page to go through and review and potentially redline a contract page. These contracts can be hundreds of pages long. So if you think about a lawyer sitting there spending their days, weeks, doing this redlining activity, if you've got a playbook that's defined against a certain type of contract, you can run this issue detection and redlining in literally minutes and seconds. So there's obviously some efficiencies there. That has implications also around ease of doing business and other types of efficiencies that you can gain out of that. I think the other area is just around risk reduction, right? How many times do you skip something in a contract and then you find out after it's already been signed that there was something in there that wasn't in your favor? So making sure that you're redlining and finding issues in your contracts the same way every time is going to reduce that risk. And we see about a 30% risk reduction when you're using generative AI technologies with your contracts.
Fascinating. So, as you said, this was your first generative AI project. You could have turned to a lot of different consultants to work with. Why did you turn to IBM?
Yeah, so IBM, first and foremost, they're a partner. So we're a customer of IBM's. We're using IBM Cloud. We're a customer of IBM Watson. We're using the Studio and the Assistant and other tools within their suite of products. IBM is a leader in the AI space, so that's obviously they have a deep heritage in this. But the biggest issue is just the way that they built their platform around orchestration of multi-models and the fact that they have an open AI solution. So you're not relegated to this black box that's IBM proprietary. You can take on other types of models. So for example, we're using Llama inside of watsonx because we found that model fit our needs the best. So having all this openness, orchestration, and the fact that IBM is a leader in this space made it a natural partner for us.
And as you said, not only are they a client of you, but you're, or rather the other way around, that not only are you a client of theirs, but also they're a client of you, that they are using your technology to open up their enormous amount of contracts to the line of business, right?
Yeah, that's correct. So about March, April last year, we won a decision with IBM. So they're implementing both buy-side and sell-side contracts within IBM globally using the Sirion platform. We have our first go-live next week. Yay. So they've ingested about 500,000 contracts into our platform and are seeing value out of it. and are now an early adopter for our generative AI SKUs as well.
Fantastic. Well, we wish you all the success in the world. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.